Happy Friday and welcome to SJ Review. Falcon and the No Longer... What? Okay, we're going to talk about the finale of Falcon and Winter Soldier. I'm Roth Cornet. That's Eric Goldman. We're going to do spoilers. If you haven't seen it, where are you on this video, man? Check it out. Go check out the show. Come back and chat with us because it's spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, explosion. Oh my goodness. Eric.
Yes.
Let's dive into it because this was an episode that I will say for the first, I think, 20 minutes or so, I was like, oh, this is the total third act experience. And it was a lot of really cool action sequences. I will say that how they integrated the fighting style of the Falcon and the Shield was really cool for Sam. But I worried like, oh, we're going to lose all the substance that we had going on the series.
Yeah.
Not so.
Yeah,
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did either. So Roth and I have not spoken about this at all this episode. Sometimes we have a little bit of talk. I found this finale very messy, which I guess has been the show in general for me. I was definitely glad, especially like there's some of the stuff in the final scenes, although some things I thought hit better than others. They didn't forget those themes of the show. There was a lot of clunkiness here to me where things kind of felt rushed, or they did something where I was like, well, that's interesting, but I want to see more of the follow-up in this story because I know there's always more. I know there's going to be more, but I thought that there was a couple scenes missing. Like I just felt dramatically speaking, we needed a couple things that were missing, even though I guess the thing that makes me happiest is that I think they did right by Sam. I think like the last couple episodes, like the show, veered more into like being like, no, this is telling like his story more than anyone's. And, coming to fruition and that title change at the end, there was a lot of, so with him, I felt like they really sort of did right by this entire arc and what the story we've been following. There's some other aspects I thought were a lot clunkier with some supporting characters and things I wish they'd done differently. So it was kind of a mixed bag for me.
I agree. And I will say, I think we talked about this last week, so I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but they tried to do too much with this series. And I think that's sort of what we've been feeling over the last couple of episodes. And listen, there may have been complications with shooting and COVID and all of those things but ultimately it's also on the page. They just introduced too many characters that are important characters with really important events happening in their lives and really just quickly moved through them. And so this became like, and this happened in Power Broker, the reveal about the Power Broker, I think, and I don't know if this is located in the fact that we've just known it because it was completely obvious. And I don't know that that's a problem because would it have been worse to do a bait and switch? I don't know, but I just don't think that her arc worked. I just don't think there was enough there for her arc to truly work. I think with Bucky, they tried to tie it up with way too neat a bow at the very end there, and underscoring and agreeing with you entirely. The one character that was served is the one that should have been served well, which is Sam and his story. I was worried at the end, like, are we really going to deal with this? But he did. I was worried, are we just going to put the suit on and pretend all the other stuff isn't an issue? But I think they did in the way that a show like this and a Marvel series like this can. I think they actually have attempted to and did a fairly good job of serving that story well, and that's the one you couldn't screw up.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar to WandaVision in so much as although I in its totality I was more into WandaVision. Both shows have two title characters, but really there's one who's sort of coming into their own is like the one. And that's the one that and I feel like they nailed in both cases. It's like, oh, they really nailed like what they were going for, both taking on a new mantle at the end. So it is funny, these parallels. Even with Sam, I'll say like, I don't think it was all perfect. Like, I think in its execution, his sort of big speech in front of the news was
very on the nose,
very clunky. And something about, I was like, I understand the point is that this is being broadcast to the world, but something about how specific what he was saying, and it just felt like I might have bought this a little more if it was behind closed doors. I don't know. It just, there was something about the way they played. It was just staging of it, I didn't think really worked well. It was very on the nose. But then it was followed by the stuff with Isaiah, and I was just really glad they came back to that. That had been some of the most powerful stuff throughout the series. Carl Lumley giving this wonderful performance every time he popped up in this show. So that was sort of really meaningful, and showing, the recognition of that and the importance of that. That made me very happy, to the point that, again, I didn't watch it through in its entirety, but this morning I was kind of going through the whole episode again. I was like, well, it still gets me the final moments, both at the Smithsonian, and then also just sort of the sweet and Return of the Jedi ending, like, celebration, and this sort of nice sweet moment between Bucky and Sam. I'm like, it ends on a really good note that feels really good, especially about Sam's journey. So I think there's going to be a lot of complaints as we talk about this episode, but I do want to make sure to say they got that part really well.
I think there is going to be too, and we can talk about some of our complaints.
Yeah.
We'll pick our nits.
Yeah.
But
Bills are quibs.
We certainly will, sir. But I think, like you, I do want to say, agreed. Listen, in terms of structure, in terms of execution, in terms of vibe, in terms of what they were trying to do, WandaVision is just more for me as a series. That said, what they were trying to accomplish here with Falcon and Winter Soldier, where they're trying to really talk about the essence of what it is to be a citizen in the world, why we call one thing terrorism, the other thing not, what it means to wear the stars and stripes, to be an American, to the failure of that, the rot of that, while all in the guise of a Marvel series about this character, Captain America, deconstructing what that means while still honoring what Steve Rogers meant in this universe. It's so ambitious, and it's so much more worthy on the page than what WandaVision was trying to do, which really just tell a cool story about grief on humanity, and I think did very well because it was so centered on that one thing in this very cool way. I kind of net here where it's like, this was messy, it wasn't done perfectly, and it was super ambitious. I mean, it's like crazy, wildly ambitious what they were trying to do, especially in the context of a 6-episode Marvel series, which isn't to excuse anything or to put aside anything that wasn't working. But I think I value what it was trying to do more than what I believe was better execution on WandaVision.
Yeah, it is tricky because again, it's like there was the version of this show that was just a cool action show between two likable characters. They had much bigger ambitions for that, and I definitely value that, even though I can't say they nailed every single thing they were trying for, but they had some really good moments along the way. And even the questions they were raising, as we've said before, were ones that you might think they would sidestep, or be even on a corporate level might be told, no, you can't talk about that. So I am just glad that they did all that, and some of it did very well, and some of it they didn't do well. But I do put a lot of value overall in what it did, even though, WandaVision is probably the show I would feel I'd probably want to revisit more, just as far as like, oh, this is like hitting. I think, first of all, it works better, and also just like hits more the tone for me. But Falcon Winter Soldier, I think, had a lot of good stuff in it. It just, you kind of had a lot of whiplash sometimes for some of the back and forth.
I think there was whiplash, and you're right. I think ultimately it's a very uneven series. I think they would have been better served, in this woman's opinion, to just really hone in. I would have sacrificed 75% of what was in this show in favor of paying attention to the relationship between Sam and Isaiah more. And candidly exploring the flag smashers more. Like you, at the very end, they say, "Why are you calling them terrorists? What do you think they would call you?" Which is a really important point that he's making. But it's like right at the end, I mean, and you've been setting that up the whole time, but you've also been setting up this idea of protecting the status quo, and there is just a dynamic tension there where, like, either you are or you're not. And I think what he's trying to say is, like, it's not perfect. but I'm going to try and live in this world that isn't perfect as best I can,
Yeah.
which I think is a beautiful thing on his part. But it just like, I think if they had, you had to deal with Bucky in some sense because uh, he could have been Captain America according to the comics. Either one of them could,
Mhm.
and you have to tell the story of why it's Sam. And I wish that had just been honed in on a little more and like kind of scraped away some of the edges.
Yeah.
Um, but like I even think the introduction of this other Captain America, I get why it works in the story, but at the end of the day, he's trying to make this point, and yet this man has brutally murdered someone in the middle of the street and then essentially walked away.
Yeah. That was yeah, there's just so many different
I mean, to the
directions to
point
go.
that he gets to quip with Bucky at the end.
Yeah, that was let's talk about that because that was a very strange thing. Like, look, again, as someone who read the comics, like I understood that eventually they would redeem John Walker and that he's not supposed to. Even this show actually went way over out of its way more than the comics when they introduced him to be like he's not an evil person. In fact, he wants to do good, but he's a very flawed person. He's not right to be Captain America. And we'll see how the weight of that will like make him make terrible decisions and go into a bad place. And I am cool with a moment of truth being chase after Carly for revenge or save those people. And I think that works, that it's like he makes a decision to save the people. It is bizarre that after that he's just like running with the two of them, quipping with Bucky.
What was that?
It was very bizarre. And that was one of the scenes I felt was so lacking. Was Sam walks by him and gives him a nod. I'm like, no, they have to have a conversation. They have to
Yeah.
talk. John has to talk about how he feels that Sam is now holding that shield. And maybe he accepts it. Maybe he's still pissed about it, even though there's a begrudging acceptance, something. And I know, again, this is one of those things where I don't think you can leave it for later because he'd been a big part of the show. And so we need the fact that the last time we see him, he's in the US agent costume, but again, it's like played kind of light. And he's like, I'm back. And I'm like, man, this feels very strange. Like we need one or two, just really one, a scene with him and Sam and maybe Bucky too, talking some of this stuff out, because it was just strange, that pivot from he makes a moment of truth and saves the people. That's great. But then it's just like, hey guys, I'm just running around with you,
Because it candidly, like on a deeper level, it sort of undercuts with the I hear, if I was giving it a lot of credit, I would say that the series was with that acknowledging a truth about our world, which is that that guy could just get away with it and be, I'm back after having done this heinous murder,
yeah.
no matter the circumstances. Uh, if I was giving it the credit of understanding what it was doing there, but the way they played it, I don't believe that that was accurate. I think it
Right.
was like really like totally not getting. Do you understand how much you're undercutting everything else?
It,
Like to not have this guy really have to earn his way back, and then he gets to quip with them.
it was so strange because Bucky is there to sort of represent someone who has sought and in our eyes found redemption for terrible things he did, and he's in this finale talking to Carly about that and the weight of people whose lives you've taken. So there is a place to have him and John have that conversation too. So it's just so strange that we're just kind of skipping past all that to be like, oh John, it's like no, we're not there yet. We can be there. We're like, thank you for helping try to save those people, but we can't be like, now he's like that annoying guy that we're teamed up with. Like, there's many steps to get to between that.
Yeah, and I do think like if there's a season two, there's an interesting story to tell for Bucky,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's fine to wait to a season two to do that.
Yeah.
And I hope Captain America's busy being Captain America in a lot of movies, but I agree with you. Like that part fell flat. And can I say something very small and stupid in that moment that didn't work for me? Like fundamentally, what we're saying didn't work was like that's broken. The way you've just dealt with this character is you set him up so well to actually deal with him in a real way, to then just not deal with him at
Yeah.
the end because you want him in the US agent costume. They still didn't fix the damn mask. They pointed out the damn mask. They're fixing the mask. And I'm like, oh, it's going to come out and it's going to be a mask that works for Captain Wyatt's face. It's a terrible mask. It's the same mask and it does not work for his face. It's a small thing, but it's just like, it just says to me, it kind of like is part and parcel of they just tossed it out there and didn't
Yeah.
really pay attention to what they were saying with him in this final episode.
It was just a strange thing in the finale that, except for Sam, it did seem like they were kind of hurrying through things. And that was, you mentioned it, but it's like Bucky, who, you and I both really found the stuff in the first episode with him very powerful, and sort of seeing his life and the weight of everything, and him striking up this friendship with this man whose son, the guilt he has. And we knew they were going to have this scene together. And then I don't know why we cut away from it. He starts to tell him, and then we cut to him leaving, and we don't know how it all ended up, how Yori kind of landed with like how he feels about Bucky. Like, we see Bucky look through the window and it's supposed to be like, okay, everything's okay now, but I'm like, that's so strange.
Is it
that we
though?
Is it though?
Why
Maybe it
would
is,
it be?
because we didn't see. It was just a very strange to cut away from that conversation, because they'd done really well with that Bucky stuff in the first episode, and then last week was Sam telling him, you need to make amends in a better way than you are. And so that was really strange to me. Like, it felt like they kind of they pivoted out of that, or were like, just let's just say everything worked out fine in this incredibly heavy conversation they're about to have.
Let's just assume it was all good. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I do think that in that sense, then, the Winter Soldier got cheated out of having any and if there's any secondary character that should have, because this is Sam's story and it should be, but if there's any secondary character that should have been given their due, it's the other title character.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, it's the Winter Soldier.
Right.
I wish they hadn't done so much of the stuff that they did, because it distracted, and I think it made it they wrote themselves into a corner with how much they could do with any. It's like they set it up so well in those. Well, they were uneven episodes throughout, candidly, but like each individual arc was set up really well. I do think was set up really well. Each individual arc was so. Whether it was Captain Wyatt or whether it was Bucky, certainly Sam, even
Flag
Sharon, certainly the Flag Smashers,
Yeah.
and then all of them just sort of fizzled away. Like, even candidly, the Flag Smashers in this final episode, it's like they seem to be disagreeing with her in order to highlight that she's gone too far, but it's like she's actually not saying anything different than she said the entire time.
Yeah.
So why do you feel differently about it, other than you're trying to let us know, the audience know, that she's now Daenerys in the last episode?
Yeah.
She's saying the same thing.
That was an unfortunate thing too, where it's like they never quite, like they had back and forth with her, and we were clearly we're supposed to understand that she's like a sympathetic villain, or certainly someone who's doing things for noble intent, and very much believes in what she's doing, and she's not portrayed as like a horrible villain, as my phone rings. But it did feel like we didn't all come together in the way they wanted. And even when she and Sam are interacting in the finale, and she's kind of upset because, and they had some really good stuff together a couple episodes ago, the two of them and their connection, but I don't think it all coalesced in this finale with her, as far as like getting more of her point of view. Yeah, I just felt, I mean, I again, and Colonel's stuff, like, it is interesting when she's like, it's okay if we all die, and the rest of them are kind of like, I don't know if it's okay if we all die, but we need more, because nothing's really done with that, and then they're all killed, so it's not like there's more to follow on that path, or like a fracture within them,
I think if we were just to capture kind of the essence of our quibbles, it's that I think at every point where we felt unsatisfied, it's because they were using a very obvious cheat, a very obvious story cheat. So in other words, they cut away because they really don't know how to deal with what that conversation would look like, and it would take a lot of time actually to let it play out. They have the rest of the Flag Smashers look at her in horror to stand in for how we, the audience, should feel. It's telegraphing, this is how now you should feel about her. And we're showing you that through their expressions. And it's really all a bunch of Sharon says, I get this to some degree. It says on the phone, oh, well, don't worry about, we don't have super soldiers. I've got all these weapons now, which is telling you she was playing the long arc and she didn't care if they shot the one guy that could give her super soldiers. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much more valuable a super soldier would be than any given weapon? Like, it just is all such a cheat. And I think And by the way, I say this again, it sounds like so negative, so I apologize, because I really value what they were trying to do. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
so awesome what they were trying to do. They could not do it in 6 episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
They just like they needed more time, and they needed, in order to smooth out some of the messy edges that I think we're talking about throughout the series, they needed a longer arc so that some of those things could have played out more subtly over time rather than being crammed in. I think that would have helped, even if they had all these different threads, which I still contend they're too many.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
they needed more time to let those things really play out. You
Mm-hmm.
introduce this idea of his conflict, and then Sam's internal conflict, which I do think was the best resolution. That needed more time too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those things where yeah, they even either needed more time or less plot lines, and it's one of those you know there are everything I'm mentioning here are things that I liked at least conceptually, or sometimes I just like the character anyway. But it's like there's a version of this that's cleaner and stronger without Zemo. There's a version of this cleaner and stronger without Sharon. Just as far as like less and being able to focus more if you're going to do 6 episodes and not have to juggle so many things so that you feel like yeah almost
I
everything we're
really
mentioning.
liked what he was doing, Eric, though.
But
But
that's
you're right, you're right. But I
no,
really
but
liked what he was doing.
because everything we can mention, if they took out Walker, if they took out the Flag Smashers, I can name things I like about all those elements. I can name episodes and scenes
And moments.
yeah, and moments that were all good with everything. But when you get to the 6th episode and you feel like, man, they are racing to try to tie everything together, and a lot of times they aren't doing it successfully, it felt like yeah, maybe we needed less in this particular series, or at least a couple more episodes if we're going to kind of let it play out more.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think the Flag Smashers, in terms of like, I do think you needed those villains. And the reason that I don't think those villains were served, and I don't think her character was ultimately served, but I do think that that particular villain was, those particular villains were like kind of genius, because you can't contextualize what it is to be an American without or it's very hard to do without the outside experience of placing that in a global context,
What
and
is being
even
projected out there?
what is
Yeah.
being projected, and to contextualize that even more, like on an individual basis, you've probably had this experience too. um, as as you travel, you kind of like get more clarity on your identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think as you expand in life, you get more clarity on your identity and what it means. So like, you leave your hometown, you leave your country, you meet different friend groups, whatever. As you expand, you understand yourself on a deeper level.
Mhm.
So I actually think they really needed that, because also what we are in a global context is important. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
what this world would have been reckoning with. Um, that would have been important. Now, do I think all of that was played out to the depth that it could have been? I really don't. But I just love that they tried, Eric. I
I
really
know. I
do.
know. Same here. It is. I know. It's yeah, it's that thing of being like, hey, there's a version of this that was very superficial and could have been cool, could have been like, that was really fun. But they had deeper aspirations than that, and I definitely admire that. And because when they nailed those things, they did it so well, and we have these really weighty, great scenes, like some of the stuff with Sam and Isaiah, that you're just like, wow, that's phenomenal. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth here. Yeah, and then Sharon is the other one. Here, I'll throw in a couple of questions I'm seeing that we have from the chat, because it'll lead us to some of these things. So Gabe Logan asks, why would the government offer Sharon another CIA slot when she committed treason and previously worked for Hydra Shield? Well, the latter I'll forgive her for, because she didn't know about Hydra Shield and she helped. But yeah, I don't know if they give her the pardon is one thing, but like, come back, to your
Totally. Like, do you want all the state secrets right now? I mean, it's
right.
ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous.
Yeah, that is a lot.
And also, it says a lot about our failure of security that they have no idea who she is and what she's been up to, and that they don't want to investigate before they offer her a job at the CIA.
Yeah. So with her, that was interesting, because I first and foremost, I'll say, look, I don't think in any way it is meant to be a shock. So if anyone's like, oh yeah, come on, you were trying to surprise us with her being the power broker, I don't think it was meant to be at all. I mean, they literally last week were showing her like hiring Batroc, like, so it was not supposed to be a aha, she's the power broker moment. But I think we needed more about why. And again, this is where I definitely think we have that tricky thing of, yes, I love how interconnected it all is. I'm all in on the MCU. I will be watching it all, and I'm excited to see the next steps of it. But you also want to deliver something that feels complete in itself before you pass the baton to the next chapter, right? So with Sharon, I thought we needed a little more. I get that there's the bitterness that I got abandoned, but has stands, it seems like she's made a full heel turn, right? Like to the point that she was willing to let Sam die because Batroc might have killed him. And I've seen the theory floating out there. A lot of people are like, what if she's a Skrull? Because Secret Invasion is coming. And if Secret Invasion is anything like the comics, it's going to be like a bunch of people have actually been Skrulls for a few years. And I get that the blip gives them a nice amount of time to do that. If that was the case, I would have liked to have seen her in that final scene reveal that she's a Skrull, because as is, I don't think we get any sort of closure on her or any sort of satisfaction on what's going on with her. It's just, she is totally heel turn villain. And I felt like we needed something more here, like, you know, to put a button on it, to feel at least like, okay, I can buy into this. So if she's a Skrull, show us now. Because right now it's just kind of like, okay, when she pops up next, I guess she'll have a big speech at some point about what made her go this bad. Or if she's playing like, you know, 8D chess and she's still a good guy doing all this terrible stuff, but it felt weird the way they left it.
I agree. And I also just want to underscore, even if she had a total heel turn, even if she was the power broker, la, 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 it only makes sense if she's a Skrull, and these are the two reasons why. One, if she's really just a power broker, she's never giving up. That she would find a way to not have to give up the idea of that she could be the sole person in charge of this. Do you know what you have in your hands if you have that? Like, who cares about this government? I have all of them, you know?
Right,
like,
right.
You just wouldn't give that up. You would not play that card in the hopes of a pardon. That's one thing. And then, so like, if she's a Skrull and she's trying to infiltrate the CIA, I agree with you. The show better have given us a better reason why they take her back in.
Yeah. And it was just, yeah, it was kind of strange. By the way, this is a funny little thing that, and again, this is again where I can only speculate about COVID and strangeness of reshoots and or not. You know, apparently maybe there were reshoots or just when they had to go back and finish. But it was funny to me that they got their money's worth with that one little council room where John was kicked out and Sharon is pardoned, but it's also the room where U.S. Agent walks out and like, okay, that felt like Julia Louis-Dreyfus. They had her for one day, so they're like, we just have her in this one set, so we'll just shoot the other. Because I'm like, this seems very strange that she would bring him there to come out
specifically.
Yeah, that is just a
Production
amusing quibble, not a how dare they, but it's just amusing.
Well, I'm not how daring they on anything because I you know, listen, anything is, again, like, it's our job to sit here and talk about what for us worked and didn't, and that'll be different than other people, candidly. We're all bringing ourselves to these things, even the things that we like, we're bringing ourselves. The way the topics that they've approached are interesting topics to me, and particularly in the context of Captain America, I've wanted them to address what that means forever. By that I mean 10 years. So yeah, like I this to me is a story I've wanted them to address. Is like, well, what does that even mean to be an American if he's Captain America? And they did. So that's one thing. And so I give it to anybody that takes on something hard, and you need to offer like kind of some empathy for, well, it was really hard, so it wasn't going to be perfect, and a lot of it was great and thought-provoking. But yeah, we're here to also point out, well, this didn't totally work for me. And I wish they would have, that's the character that to me, I was like, just stop, just take that character. Not because I don't like her, I actually really do, but because she was so ill-served. I think you're right on, it kills me because I thought Zemo brought a very interesting perspective about supremacy. And so you could put those words in someone else's mouth, you know, they wouldn't be as good an actor as Daniel Bruhl, probably. But you're right, because it's Zemo, you need a little more out of it. There's just a ton they could have done to help strip this down a bit.
Yeah, yeah. It was so many balls in the air, and I understand why each of them they made sense in the big scheme of like how it could factor into this story of the Captain America mantle. They all make sense to as possibilities to include, but when you watch it all together, you're like, yeah, that's probably a couple too many, you know. Uh,
Well, and I do think you needed Captain Wyatt.
I do. I think so. I think him and the Flag Smashers,
You
they
needed
make a lot of
them.
sense to this story. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think they just mishandled him at the end. Like
Mhm.
I would have rather seen him go to jail and deal with that later, deal with his arc, or have to go into hiding or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Again, you could still do the he saves those people, but it can't be now everything's okay. Like it shouldn't be. It should be
Couldn't.
like that is a moment of truth for you and this can be a road to something else, but it shouldn't be okay, everything's forgiven, we're all good now. Like, that was such a weird moment there.
Yeah.
Uh oh sorry.
What other comments are we getting?
We got Mac Attack 423 who says a bit of a superficial question, but what did you think of Sam's costume? It grew on me at first. I thought it looks kind of goofy, especially the top of his head peeking out. What do you think, Roth? Of
So I agree
Mhm.
that I thought it looked a little goofy at first. What I really like about it is how they were able to blend, like I said before, especially in the fight
Mhm.
sequences, how he worked as the Falcon and then having the adding the shield to it. Like that was a really cool.
Yeah,
I felt like it was this idea, this larger idea of merging identities. Which I thought was a really cool way for him to become Captain America in his own way that was unique to him. And also, it helps support the fact that he would be able to fight without the super serum because he's Batmaning it. He just has all this stuff, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, there was some very cool sort of integration of the shield into the Falcon fighting. Like I really liked when he landed on the bridge and like basically blocked the helicopter with like his wings and the shield.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a
Or
great
when he
beat.
was falling back and the wings stopped him and the shield came out,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
That there was some really fun stuff there, and just some cool visuals, like the wings kind of sweeping into the water. Just on a total practical, like, oh, did it look good level? I think it mostly looked good. It was very comics accurate to the costume Sam wore as Captain America, with a couple differences. This is a funny thing we talked about with Wyatt Russell. Some people's faces and heads don't work right for the exact masks and things from the comics, so they gave him a pretty comics accurate version of the cowl and like the hair coming out, but it looked a little strange, and it's one of those things where, and the neck was a little weird. It looked like he couldn't move his neck fully, kind of a early Batman costume problem. It's a quibble because I think they're gonna fix it. Just like Captain America's costume itself went through so many permutations, and the version of
Yeah.
Avengers that they even kind of joked about in Endgame was pretty goofy looking.
Yeah.
So I bet you the next time we see him, it'll be a variation on this costume, and they'll tweak those things. I think overall he looks really cool. The visual of him in that red, white, and blue, but with the wings and the shield, worked really well. So some of the things about the mask being off, it doesn't really bug me too much because I'm like, it'll be fine. Like, just like I can watch Avengers 1 and love that movie, even though Cap's costume is not my favorite in that movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, and the other thing too is like the essence of, I was so glad they gave it, even though I will agree with you, like the speech, the execution was maybe a little clunky, but not from him, not from Anthony Mackie, but just like the staging of it, to your point.
Mhm.
That said, I was really glad they gave him that speech because um, I was worried. I was like, this can't be glossed over, and like who he is and what he's bringing to the table as Captain America, as opposed to kind of the point of view that Steve Rogers did, is really important. And I thought I think they kind of like, this is my mission statement is what happened, and this is what I am offering as Captain America, and it's all stuff that I think is like essential and we would want, we like, I'm like, yeah, I'm on board, you're my Cap, like I was pretty devoted to that previous iteration. I really loved him. So like what he had to offer I thought was unique to him. It set him apart from Steve. It was a next evolution of, and I thought a really great mission statement, and I think sets him up, I hope, to be taking on that mantle really in the larger movies as well.
Yeah.
But so I was really glad they gave it to him, actually.
I just hope that now that they've opened sort of the can of worms, not just of this there was a specific thing of for Sam himself and what Captain America meant as a symbol, but there was also the like life after this show being the first time we've really dealt with it on a more granular and more like dark level about what this would mean. And you kind of can't put the genie back in the box on that. And it shouldn't be the focus of everything. I don't need Hawkeye to have 90% of it be about this, but it does have to come back up again. Because even at the end, I was like, when he went to see Isaiah and Isaiah had a line about like, you got the GRC to back down. I'm like, well, we're going to need some follow up on that. Like, so they're not going to relocate those refugees, but what will happen?
What then? What?
Yeah.
What? I mean?
Yeah. So that's one of those things where you kind of can't. Again, they did this major thing in Endgame, that 5 years later idea, which dramatically had a lot of weight for Endgame, but now everything else has to deal with. So yeah, I just hope we kind of see more of that. And I agree with you in that speech kind of needed to exist. I just wish it would kind of had landed a little better, but at the same time, it was important, to kind of give him that moment and to show, like you said, that he is going to represent Captain America in a different way than Steve. Actually, I'll read a question here because it kind of leans into that. Leon Avery the third asks, "What are your thoughts on people actually calling Sam Captain America? I enjoyed it when Sam saved the diplomats and the two guys were talking about his titles."
Yeah. What's your take on that?
I thought I think it was fun. Like I think like it was again on the nose, but in a way that I totally appreciate. It was sort of it was somewhat evocative of some of the like Tobey Maguire or Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies with like the street people kind of rooting for him, but in a way it's a little cheesy, but also kind of pretty great. And the conversation between the guys when he said that's Black Falcon and he goes, no, that's Captain America. Was really great. By the way, I don't even know if we talked about when the previous time they'd used the term Black Falcon with the kid, and which was like a meta joke on the fact that so many Black superheroes were called Black whatever for a lot of years. It was like when in the 60s and 70s, if they introduced anyone, as we've seen with like Black Lightning and all these characters, they had to have that literally in their name. So there was a nice meta joke there on comic books, but also just on identity and identification. So I thought it was really good. And I think just the fact that he introduced himself as Captain America and people calling him that, to Bucky saying Cap at the end, I thought that was actually, I thought that stuff was really, really, really sweet. And if there was a slightly cheesy side to it, that's totally fine in that case. Like this is this, because at the end of the day, they are also telling a sort of superhero origin story, even though Sam was already a superhero. Now he's kind of coming to his own into a different way. And so, but there's all this added weight of Captain America, like just the deconstruction of what that name would even mean. Again, a name that when they launched Captain America, the first movie, they called it the first Avenger, rumor has it, because they were so afraid of trying to sell a movie called Captain America around the world.
Overseas. Yeah. So echoing kind of what you're saying here is like, because I wanted to make sure I understood the question. Like, do you think he should? I didn't know if the question was.
No. I think it was. Did we like how they kind of played into that? Like, because they did several moments that were about him. Just whether it be himself or other characters using the term Captain America.
Right.
Kind of like how they did that. Yeah.
Having said that, yeah, agree with you. And I think it was good that they went through the various iterations kind of in those moments. It is the series acknowledging conversations to some degree that may happen within the audience, and that have happened in comics history over time and have happened in culture over time, to your point. But yeah, where I land is like, he's Captain America. He's Cap now, like, period. He just is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what he should be called.
Yeah.
And that's how he should be treated within the universe, so like that position of leadership is now his. And that's I've been saying that throughout this, as we've been doing this reviews, but to me, this series is step one, I guess, of the evolution of that character. And it's a very important step one to the evolution of that character. And I'm glad they had the time to do it here versus trying to rush it into 5 minutes. Can you imagine 5 minutes of a movie? But Marvel has now made a promise to us, the audience, and to their own franchise, that this is Captain America and this Captain America represents this. This is this Captain America's mission statement. And he's the leader of the Avengers. And that's that. And if they move away from that, that is where I think I would say the series has totally, and Marvel as an entity has totally failed itself.
I mean, I could accept, whenever the Avengers, and I'm not counting Young Avengers, which I think will probably happen, but be its own thing, obviously, because it'll be a team of young characters. There will eventually be a new team of Avengers, right? Like they will do that. And I guess I can accept the version where maybe, if you wanted to do the version where Sam is not a member of that team, it's like Captain America hasn't always been a member of the Avengers, and it's just you have him make his decision that he'd either do his own thing. But yeah, I agree that it's like he needs to be significant, like, just figure in the MCU. He can't just be like popping in, because this was so much about him taking on that identity and the importance of it in the world and certainly in this country, that needs to play into it. And he can't just be like, someone who pops in. Again, this is MCU. He could pop in here and there, but he needs to have his own weighty, significant part of other stories as well.
Yeah, I do think that would be kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a cheat, but it would just kind of like be a failure. I kind of like in this case, I agree with you. Like in the comics, like people rotate and whatever, and like the Avenger, who the Avengers are, they rotate and things like that. But, if Chris Evans was still Captain America, there would be another Captain America movie. So, Anthony Mackie is Captain America now, and there better be another Captain America movie.
Yeah. You know what is a weird thing that me at the ending, because it was really sweet. Like I said, the very final moments going to credits were really sweet with like, the sort of silent montage of them all, and Bucky playing with the kids, and then that final moment with the two of them, and they went to the, and then we go and it says Captain America and the Winter Soldier. That was really cool. But there was a part of me that thought, wouldn't it be great if it said Captain America and Bucky? Because the Winter Soldier is not a name he wants. Like he says it like he's still in there. Like it's like a sort of, it's his Hulk. It's like a monstrous part of him. And again, we do think they kind of skip through it too quickly. But when he sends his book to the psychiatrist, and he's like basically saying he's done. He's crossed out all the names. We get the idea some time has passed. And so he did go to other people that he wanted to make amends to. So I almost kind of like, maybe you should have said Captain America and Bucky, because he no longer has to feel the burden of the Winter Soldier, But I do think maybe because they skipped past that too much, maybe we need to get to that some.
I agree with you. I don't think so, because I don't think they earned him having released the weight of the Winter Soldier just yet.
Right. They told us he did, but they didn't they didn't get there.
They didn't show
They didn't do the steps to use the vernacular.
So like I think he still is the Winter Soldier until he's something else. Right. And I don't think they've earned him being something else yet. But I think what else, Eric? One more question and then we'll wrap it up. We've gone even longer than the show.
I'll go
to point out.
Getting in on a total speculation one, but awesomely curious, who is curious. So there we go. Do you think S.H.I.E.L.D. knew about Isaiah? And he mentions Fury, Peggy, Howard Stark. Has sort of, what should we take? Who would have known, and how much? I guess I've seen other people ask this. How much should we kind of take other people to task? Like, who might have known about this, including people we care about, would have known about this.
Yeah, the truth is, as a fictional universe, they're never going to have the characters that we really care about a ton. Like Peggy certainly have known about that, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just not going to do that, because that is a very tough thing to reconcile. They're going to have been an offshoot of that was happening over here, and only a small number of people would have known about that. The reality, if they wanted to deal with that, is a lot of people would have known. Right.
I think that there's room to have one of them, and it wouldn't be Peggy. You're absolutely right. Maybe Howard Stark, but certainly
maybe
Fury.
Howard.
Yeah, they could do Howard, and they could also do Fury, as far as Fury already being a character who compartmentalizes and is sort of like, we did terrible things, but sometimes, they were done in the moment. So you could bring that up. And it's funny because, I saw an interview with some of the producers about Julie Louis-Dreyfus' character, and they mentioned her as a sort of more morally gray Nick Fury. So these are all things that could come up again. Yeah, that's kind of the thing they were saying. Yeah. I guess because at the end of the day, we know Nick is a good person, but we don't know yet where she lands even.
So she seems kind of evil.
She seems pretty evil, or is it just more like, I'll just do anything for what I think is right? But yeah, I do think
playing with that too. Did I? Maybe.
Did I? Yeah. And she's very funny. She's funny, and she's allowed to be funny in that moment. John hasn't earned it yet, but she can be. But yeah, I think you're right, Roth. I think awesomely curious. the answer is what Ross said, which is in real life, they probably all would have known. I don't think that they're saying Peggy knew. And it might not ever come up again, but they could do the version where Howard or Nick knew and felt it was better to keep it quiet. But we'll see. I don't necessarily think that'll come up, though. I think we have to just accept that if they could keep the Hydra of it all secret, they could keep this as like just a very small group of people knew.
Yeah, I mean, I will say too, it's like I actually would want to do research, but like on the experiments that were done on soldiers, period in the world, like how many people knew, how many people didn't, I don't know. And to quote the other side of the coin of what I just said is like probably a lot of things have happened with a very small group of people truly knowing the full scope.
Right.
Like that there might have been people that were even there that didn't understand the full scope of what they were doing. That it was on a very much need to know basis, and that was high level in a small group of people. The other thing that I would say is this, and this is a weird thing to bring up right now, but like there's a Malcolm Gladwell book, Talking to Strangers. I don't know if you've read it. But essentially it postulates that we as human beings have a bias to believe others, which seems odd, I know, and especially in the world that we're in now that's so paranoid. But with that often institutionally you think everybody knew something and a lot of people actually didn't.
Right.
So I'm contradicting myself.
No, because there's also that idea that people believe the lie because it was more comfortable to believe the lie, or
Than
like,
the truth.
Yeah. But again, I don't think we're gonna. I don't think they want to, nor do I want them to tear down Peggy. We still have to deal with.
Don't want them to
have to deal with her great niece Sharon doing her bad stuff.
Just
so
leave Peggy alone.
Peggy can stay pure, but we got to deal with what the hell's going on with Sharon.
Sharon's a mess, but let's leave Peggy alone.
Yes, leave Peggy alone. That's our hashtag.
And please, that would be like Steve knowing. It just would be too. We can't. We would break.
Yeah, we can't.
We can't do it. Like we can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's it, Eric. I mean, I think we've said all that we have to say. I hope you guys liked it. I want to hear in the comments below, and maybe some of our quibbles are the same or not the same as yours. Maybe some of the things that we liked are not the same as yours, and curious what everybody's thinking. But at the end of the day, it has been interesting to see these series play out. I'm curious where we go with Loki next, which will be a very, very different thing on its own right. But again, I will just underscore one final time that how much I respect what they were aiming for.
Yeah. It was very impressive. Again, like, I think especially when we rightfully so are wary of like how much Marvel or Disney especially are willing to kind of mess with these very valuable characters to them, and might want to keep everything very clean and easy and good versus evil. To see them be like, no, we can kind of get into a lot more, not just morally gray, but outright sort of dark places, and really kind of look at some sort of ugly truths that are very reflective of real life. That is pretty cool, and I think is a nice counterpoint to people who feel like, oh, these are all the same and they don't deal with anything real. And again, that's not to say that just doing that means you made amazing work of art, but it is something to say that you were even trying to open, and you're causing conversations. I think this is having a lot of people who are talking about things and bringing up things, and you think about how Watchmen taught people about real life history they didn't know, and I think this is doing the same, by doing a sort of fictional version of something that really happened. And I think that's it's one of those both sad things where we're like, oh, I wish people knew about the real stuff more, but it's also like, hey, if a major mainstream piece of art can open people's eyes up to things that they should know about, whether even if it's sort of an ugly part of our history, that is commendable as well.
It's commendable, and to me, it's the mainstream piece of art doing its job. Yeah. Like, its job is to entertain us and things like that, but to add that on, I think is a really important element. So yeah, again, I'm with you. Watchmen, frankly, was a better show.
Oh yeah.
But I really, really, really like a lot of what they did here. So we'll leave it at that, and we will join you in a couple of weeks. I don't recall.
June 11th. We have a shockingly long break now until Loki.
To talk about Mr. Loki and what he's been up to, traveling around, bopping about in time.
Yes, with Owen Wilson.
With Owen Wilson, inevitably.
Yes.
I don't know if you watched Seth Meyers, but he did a whole bit on how he's like, yeah, I love Tom Hiddleston, but like I would just love to have like 90s era Vince Vaughn to have been Loki in this context.
I saw that.
And I highly recommend you check it out. It's very funny.
I did.
All right. Thank you.